Putin calls recent US airstrikes on Iran absolutely unprovoked aggression with no justification whatsoever. Trump states US strikes cause monumental damage to Iranian nuclear facilities. And IAEA Chief Grossi says US strikes likely caused major damage to Iran's Fordow plant. Full assessment is pending. You're watching Q News at 4 with me, Henny Safe, and in the news today, Russian President Vladimir Putin has denounced the recent US airstrikes on Iran as absolutely unprovoked aggression with no justification whatsoever. Putin reaffirmed Russia's position, as expressed at the United Nations, and said Moscow was making efforts to assist the Iranian people. He welcomed the Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi's visit, saying it provided a chance to jointly discuss urgent issues and explore ways out of the crisis. Araghchi thanked Russia for its strong condemnation of the strikes, calling Moscow's stance firm, rightful, and on the right side of history. He emphasized the need for continued cooperation and international solidarity in response to what he called a clear violation of international law. Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi has met Russian President Vladimir Putin in Moscow amid heightened tensions following US airstrikes on Iranian nuclear facilities. Araghchi emphasized the depth of Iran-Russia coordination, noting that given the current special circumstances, their consultations are now more serious and closer. He called the US strikes a violation of the UN Charter and an attack on international law and the Non-Proliferation Treaty. President Putin condemned the attacks as groundless aggression and said Russia stands ready to support the Iranian people. The Kremlin reiterated its strong opposition to the strikes, calling them deeply regrettable and a threat to regional stability. Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesman Ismail Baghei has condemned the recent US and Israeli attacks on Iran's nuclear facilities as illegal acts of aggression carried out with US backing. Baghei said Iran remains focused on defending its sovereignty against what he called an unjust war, supported by the US and certain European countries. Baghei stressed that Iran had engaged in diplomatic efforts, referencing a planned negotiation round in Muscat based on a US proposal which Tehran did not impose unilaterally. He dismissed accusations against Iran of pursuing nuclear weapons, highlighting the country's compliance with the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty and the International Atomic Energy Agency oversight. On regional relations, Baghei emphasized Iran's long-standing partnership with Russia, calling it a key player in international and regional affairs. US President Donald Trump has posted on Truth Social that monumental damage was done to Iranian nuclear facilities by US strikes. Trump called the impact a bullseye and noting most damage occurred deep underground. The US attacked 3 Iranian nuclear sites on June 21st with precision bombs and missiles. The UN's nuclear watchdog reported no radiation increase, but said it was too soon to assess underground damage. The International Atomic Energy Agency has held an emergency session in Vienna to assess the fallout from recent US airstrikes on Iranian nuclear sites, including the heavily fortified Fordow enrichment facility. IAEA Director General Rafael Grossi, speaking after the closed-door meeting of the agency's Board of Governors, called for maximum restraint amid escalating tensions. He confirmed that initial assessments indicate very significant damage to the underground sections of the Fordow plant, which is built deep within a mountain. Iran's permanent representative to the United Nations in Vienna, Reza Najafi, has warned that Tehran will take resolute and proportionate measures in response to threats. Najafi said the attacks marked a clear violation of international law and the UN Charter and pose a serious threat to global security. The era of unchecked impunity has come to an end, Najafi said, invoking Iran's right to self-defense under Article 51 of the UN Charter. He also warned of potentially devastating environmental consequences, including risks of radioactive contamination across the region. The IAEA convened the emergency meeting amid growing international alarm. Simultaneously, Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi held high-level talks in Moscow.
We requested the convening of an extraordinary meeting of the Board of Governors to address the grave and unprecedented acts of aggression committed by the United States and the Israeli genocidal regime against the Islamic Republic of Iran's nuclear facilities under the IAEA safeguards.
Ladies and gentlemen, we now go live to The Hague in the Netherlands. The NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte is holding a press conference. Let's watch.
Including more jobs for our people. By investing more and producing more, we build a stronger NATO. The result is also a fairer NATO as allies step up to ensure there is more equal sharing of responsibility for our shared security. As we become stronger and fairer, we will also demonstrate that while NATO is and will remain a defensive alliance, there should be no doubt about our ability and resolve to protect our nations and respond with resounding force should we be attacked. This is what it means to be a more lethal alliance. So as leaders begin together for the NATO summit here, this is our focus. Ensuring that we have all we need to deter and defend against any threat. Of course, the most significant and direct threat facing this alliance remains the Russian Federation. Moscow continues to wage war against Ukraine with the support of North Korea, Iran and China, as well as Belarus. We all want peace for the Ukrainian people and an end to the terrible war against them. Yet as work is ongoing in pursuit of a just and lasting peace, we must continue to make sure Ukraine has what it needs to defend today and deter in the future. Our support for Ukraine is unwavering and will persist. And we have, I can announce that now, new estimates showing that our European and Canadian allies have stepped up and have already pledged, where we originally would be able to announce 20 billion over the first 3 months of this year. It is now, they will provide over 35 billion euros of additional security assistance to Ukraine for the year ahead. So in a couple of months, we went from 20 billion to 35 billion. And I think that is great news. So here in The Hague, allies will reaffirm our ongoing support for Ukraine. And we will be joined by President Zelensky and his team for a range of different meetings over the next days. We also have the opportunity to engage with our partners in the Indo-Pacific, with the leadership of the European Union, and with our citizens across the alliance through the NATO Public Forum that will kick off tomorrow morning. And with that overview, I look forward to your questions.
All right, we'll start here in the front row. This woman here all the way on the right.
Secretary General, thank you very much. I wanted to ask you, now that we see the United States directly involved in the conflict in Iran, are you concerned that that impacts their view of their obligations to NATO, that it perhaps pushes NATO further down the list of priorities?
I don't think so. Of course, the news about Iran is at this moment grabbing all the headlines. And it is, of course, important news. But this summit is really about making sure that the whole of NATO, 1 billion people, will be safe not only today, but also in 3, 5, 7 years from now. And Iran, let's not forget, Iran is heavily involved in the fight of Russia against Ukraine by, for example, their drones deliveries, which are killing innocent Ukrainians every day in cities, in communities without any respect for life. So there is also a close connection between Iran, of course, North Korea, China, Belarus, but also Iran with Russia when it comes to the war in Ukraine. So no doubt it will emerge in the discussions.
Okay, we'll come to the second row here on the aisle.
Thank you very much. Mr. Rutte, can you confirm that all allies, so not only Spain, are free to spend as much money as they want, as long as they guarantee that they will fulfill the capability targets? And if so, what's this 5% worth after all?
Well, I would not buy the assumption in your question. So what we will agree as an alliance is a 5% target to spend on GDP when it comes to our collective defense. Some of us are already there almost. Take the United States. They're already spending almost 3.5% on the core defense. And no doubt they are close to spending the 1.5% on defense related. And countries like Estonia and Poland are very close. And for many others, it will still be a long road ahead. But really important that we do this.
All right, let's go to the fourth row. Gentlemen, 3 in.
Secretary General, thank you, Luis.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Luis Tovares, Spanish TV. Secretary General, yesterday you reached an agreement with Spain that it gives flexibility to meet the targets without reaching the 5%. So why this exception for Spain, and what message does it send to other countries that also believe that it's not necessary to reach 5% to meet its goals, and especially considering that Spain is right now the ally that spends the least? So, and the last question, do you think that Donald Trump agrees with this exception? Thank you.
Well, all allies agreed with the statement, and all allies agree with the capability targets. The defense ministers a couple of weeks ago nailed down the capability targets. And as you know, we are an alliance where we fight together, and if necessary, where we also suffer and die together for our collective defense. And I've always had the highest respect for Spain's contribution to NATO. They are active all over NATO territory in many missions. And Spain has also agreed with the targets. The fact is that Spain thinks they can achieve those targets on a percentage of 2.1%. NATO is absolutely convinced, Spain will have to spend 3.5% together. So each country will now regularly report on what they are doing in terms of spending and reaching the targets. So we will see. And anyway, there will be a review in 2029.
Okay, let's come to this side of the room. We'll go to the front row, the gentleman in the beige jacket.
Lauri Nurmi, security policy correspondent from Iltalehti, Finland. Dear Secretary General, 2 weeks ago, you said in London that Russia could be ready to use military force against NATO within 5 years, and repeated it in 5 years. Could you please tell us, what is this assessment based on? And can Russia attack Finland, Estonia, Lithuania, Latvia, or any other NATO nation located in the eastern flank of NATO? Thank you.
There's widespread agreement within NATO that at this moment, today, if Russia would attack us, our reaction will be devastating, and the Russians know this. But there is great worry in many circles of NATO. We have heard the Chief of Defense in Germany a couple of weeks ago, and many other senior military leaders speaking about this, and also senior intelligence community people speaking about this, that between 3, 5, 7 years from now, Russia will be able to successfully attack us if we do not start investing more today. The question could be, why do you then give this time frame to 2035? Well, of course, we will start today. That means yearly increments. There will be a huge extra defense spend already in the next 3 to 5 years. There's also time we need to make sure that that defense spend can be absorbed by, of course, hiring more soldiers, making sure that you can buy all the military equipment you need to buy without raising the prices. But that means 3, 5, 7 years from now, we will gradually build a NATO which is so strong that not only today, but also in 3, 5, 7 years and 10 years from now, nobody, not the Russians, but please be watchful what China is doing with its rapid build-up of its military. Already the same amount as ships sailing in their navy compared to the United States, and that will grow into 450 ships by 2030, 1,000 nuclear warheads by 2030. And we have to be sure and make sure that we can defend ourselves against them.
All right, let's come to the center front row. The gentleman in the...
Ladies and gentlemen, that was footage live from The Hague, the Netherlands. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, who was holding a press conference, he announced an agreement among member states on the necessity of Iran not possessing a nuclear weapon. He also emphasized that Russia represents the biggest direct threat to the alliance. Additionally, he revealed plans to announce the allocation of a new aid package to Ukraine worth 35 billion euros. NATO Secretary General stated that they are working to restore peace to Ukraine and end the Russian war. He added that the alliance agrees to spend 5% of GDP on defense and expressed absolute conviction that Spain will need to spend 3.5% to reach its targets. Ladies and gentlemen, for more analysis on today's stories, we now move to Hala Al-Hamalawi in our newsroom. Hala.
Thank you very much, Hani. For further analysis, we're joined from Ramallah by the political analyst, Dr. Ashraf Akka. Welcome to Qnews, Dr. Akka. Now, what are the risks of escalation in the region following these airstrikes, and how might Russia mediate to prevent further conflicts?
Of course, the Russian role is vital to set some diplomacy in course, given the ongoing Israeli aggression on Tehran. We are in a very critical phase. Russia will use diplomacy, and of course it will support Iran politically and strategically and in front of the international community in this confrontation. And the Israeli policy might contribute one way or another in ruining the international equation, which will worsen the conflict further, as Iran is still ready to take this confrontation and actually deal strategic strikes to the United States through its military base, or there might be a strategic decision by both Russia and Iran to close and shut down the Hormuz Strait, which will be the start of a third world war.
And how do you interpret Putin's characterization of the U.S. airstrikes as unprovoked aggression? What implications does this have for U.S.-Russia relations?
First of all, this is the unwavering Russian posture, and this is part of its strategy to preserve the global action, as the United States took unilateral decisions way beyond the international law, as the Russian posture holds on to the international law principles and the international UN resolutions to have a just world order. And it's evident that the Russians, with their experience with the United States, as we have seen in Yugoslavia and Georgia in 2008, and all the conflicts in the Middle East, that the US policy and the confrontation today in Ukraine is shows the significance of the Russian role. The war now is not only against Iran, but also in the Russian influence and its vital parameter, as it represents Central Asia and the national security of Russia in stabilizing this region. There has been minorities and ethnicities that has been targeted by the West and to divert the Russian community and its strategic and geopolitical parameter. And most importantly now, the war now in Ukraine. These different conflicts in different zones around Central Asia is an attempt to marginalize Russia and undermine its influence. As more than President Putin and his foreign affairs, when he says that the alliance of Iran are contributing to give Iran the position of a nuclear weapon. This is evidence that this conflict is taking a new shape, which is a conflict between the East and the West, led by the United States, taking the world to the impartial logic away from the UN Charter, undermining the pillars of the international law and system.
And how does the Iranian foreign minister's visit to Moscow reflect the evolving dynamics between Iran and Russia, as you have just mentioned?
There is a strategic agreement and historic relations tying the two parties, as this level of conflict. Iran requires all support possible from Russia, politically, militarily, trade-wise. This is an unequal war because the entire Western world, led by the United States, Germany and France and Britain, are leading this war against Iran, and the tool to achieve this attack is Israel. And now Iran strategically needs Russia to actually lead this confrontation, and there must be a high level of understanding between both countries. Russia and China represents major powers, members to the International Security Council, influencing the international resolutions and decisions, and I'm saying that the shutdown of the Hormuz Strait is directly related to the strategic options of the decision-making Iranian agenda. And now these are the directives of the Iranian leadership to deal with this current confrontation led by the United States.
Yes, well, I get your point. Thank you so much. That was Dr. Ashraf Akka joining us from Ramallah. He's the political analyst. Thank you so much for joining us here on Q News. And now we go back to Hani Saif in our studio to resume our bulletin. To you, Hani.
Thank you, Hela. IAEA Director General Rafael Grossi has said that U.S. airstrikes likely caused very significant damage to Iran's underground Fordow uranium enrichment plant, though full assessment is not yet possible. Grossi reported no rise in off-site radiation, but warned of serious risks from attacks on nuclear sites and urged maximum restraint. He stressed the need to return to diplomacy to maintain the global non-proliferation regime. Iran has informed the IAEA it will take special measures to protect nuclear materials, and any transfers must be reported under Iran's Safeguards Agreement.
At all three sites. The situation at the other sites.
Israeli Occupation Chief of Staff Eyal Zamir has announced that Israel is escalating its campaign against Iran's nuclear program following precise U.S. airstrikes on key sites overnight. Zamir called the U.S. strike a turning point and emphasized that Israel will continue its operations until all targets and objectives are achieved. He also highlighted joint military coordination with U.S. commanders as a critical advantage. These are all the news we have for now, but here's a reminder of today's main stories. Putin calls recent US airstrikes on Iran absolutely unprovoked aggression with no justification whatsoever. Trump states US strikes cause monumental damage to Iranian nuclear facilities. And IAEA Chief Grossi says US strikes will likely cause major damage to Iran's Fordow plant, but full assessment is pending. This concludes our news bulletin for now, but please don't forget to follow Q News on YouTube, Facebook, X, Instagram and TikTok at QNews EGY to stay informed. Thank you for watching and stay tuned for more updates here on Q News.